All right, here we go. Hey, revolutionaries. I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with Jillian Baronoff, where we're talking legal tech. That's right, legal tech. Jillian is a lawyer, recently turned entrepreneur, and she's diving into the world of app development. That's right, trying to infuse the legal world with some technology, which it's been sorely lacking, certainly behind other industries these days. So I can't wait for you to listen to this episode where she's trying to bring legal services, down to, to have easier access out there for people, and also provide a discovery tool for lawyers. So it's kind of a double-sided, kind of dual value kind of app that she's developing. Pretty interesting story that she's got. Also, since her home base is in Miami, Florida, we talk about what's happening in the tech scene in Miami. So if you're not aware that Miami and Florida over the last few years, maybe 3, 5, 8 years or so, it seems to be bubbling up on the tech radar as maybe a Silicon Valley East or South, or certainly in regards to Bitcoin. There's a lot of Bitcoiners and cryptocurrency people kind of hanging in Miami these days, and some conferences popping up down there. So I get her thoughts on that. So if you're not hip, you soon will be when you listen. But before we get there, I wanted to mention, whoa, hold on. My standing desk is moving moving without my input somehow. I must have input something to tell it to move, but got a little surprise there. Anyways, sorry about that. I got a little distracted. Anyways, before we get there, I wanted to share with you an email that Ryan Morgan sent me. So Ryan was on the last episode that I released talking about his SEO cohort. But, I get feedback from time to time from guests that are on the show and from listeners. And I thought this one was very heartfelt and meant a lot to him and his father, believe it or not, because we talk about him in the episode. So I just wanted to share his email real quick here. Jim, can't thank you enough for taking time to chat with me for your podcast. I wanted to share a real quick story that hopefully reinforces the good that you're doing. This is from Ryan. After the podcast was published, I sent a link to my dad to listen. He and my mom usually watch TV at the end of the night, and instead, they decided to listen to the podcast together. My dad called me right after to tell me how proud he was of me and how touched he was by the podcast. I'm not sure I've ever directly shared with my dad how much he and his career impacted me and mine, but the podcast seemed to be the perfect outlet, and your interview style pulled out this real story that I don't think either of us had ever shared together. I hope you get feedback on how impactful your podcast and your work is, and I hope this is just another example. So Ryan, thank you for sending me that email. And just to put that more in context, is that his dad early on was an English teacher, I believe. I think that's right. You have to listen to the episode and remind me, everybody. But he pivoted early on, this is like 20 some years ago probably, into technology because he saw the future was coming. And that had a real impact on Ryan as a child, seeing his father being able to switch gears, dive into something he didn't know a lot about, but could see like, hey, I'm curious, I'm interested, I see how the world's going to change. And that gave Ryan his, part of his mindset, part of his outlook. And it just kind of gives him like a good feeling. And now he's in alignment because he's kind of doing the same thing. He's leaning into technology, leaning into being an entrepreneur and educating. He's getting into educating people, and that really gives him a lot of value, and he provides a lot of value to everyone. So, Ryan, thanks for sending in that email. And again, for everyone who's listening out there, if you have any comments or anything you want to share, you can always email me at jimjim@jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. Or you can share a review at iTunes or any of the big apps out there that you listen on. iTunes. It's not called iTunes anymore. It's called Apple Podcasts. Anyways, I just wanted to share that because that made me feel good. So thanks, Ryan. And I hope that it's resonating for everyone else listening out there. And speaking of listening, I really like Ryan's father's idea of, instead of sitting down to watch TV again in the evening, that he decided, hey, I'm going to sit down and listen to a podcast. I love that idea. And, recently I just stumbled upon a great vehicle or activity that you can do while listening to podcasts. So I wanted to share that with everyone real quick. So it's the holidays, and for some reason, it feels like it's a good time to do a puzzle. And I haven't done a puzzle in years, probably, 20 years, maybe even longer. I don't know what happened to me, but I was out in the stores and I thought, I'm going to buy myself a puzzle. And this puzzle is a a bunch of really colorful donuts. So it's kind of fun, but it's kind of hard because all the donuts sort of look like each other. But anyways, so it's my puzzle right now is up on my dining room table, and I realized while I was doing it, it's a very zen experience. Like it really chills you out and relaxes you. And it was quiet. I decided to put on a podcast to listen to because usually podcasts are maybe half hour, maybe a couple hours. And when you get into the puzzle and you have this podcast you're listening to, it's really turns out it's a great listening vehicle. I never realized that before. So, sometimes it's hard just to sit down in one place and listen to a podcast because you feel like you need to be active or doing something. But I realized, doing a puzzle, it could be the right thing to do. So anyways, I encourage you, everyone out there listening, to give it a try, especially if you haven't done a puzzle in a while. It's kind of fun. And if you, are so inclined, throw on Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. That's all I'm saying. Okay? All right. Finally, let's get to this week's episode with Jillian. Here we go.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit jimreinventionrevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Hey everybody, this is Jim, and welcome to episode 89 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm talking today with Jillian Baronoff, and we're talking legal tech. Legal tech, that's right. Yeah, so Jillian, welcome to the Reinvention Revolution.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, well, hey, thanks for taking your time, and thanks for reconnecting. We had a little bit of a issue trying to record earlier in the week, but I'm super excited to talk to you this morning because it's Friday, and it's a great way to kick off my weekend because I love doing this podcast, of course. And in thinking, knowing that I was going to talk to you this morning, you got me thinking about Miami. So Miami, Florida, I know that's your home base these days, and I was thinking about it for two reasons. So one is that the winter is coming, and I'm here in North America here, and winter is coming, and I'm thinking I'm going to need an escape to someplace warm for the winter, because usually I like to travel to Asia in the winter where it's warm, but because of pandemic issues and such, I'm probably looking for a place closer to home. So that had one image in my mind. So can you just tell everybody what the weather is down there right now? I'm just imagining how beautiful it is.
Yes. Right now, I feel spoiled saying this, but it's probably high 60s, low 70s, which I would consider a cold front for us. This is likely our coldest winter we've had in a few years, where I woke up and I really felt like I needed a sweatshirt.
Oh my gosh.
I'm originally from New York, and I've been here for most of my life, but 60-something degrees, I'm ready to put on a winter coat, so I don't think I could go back up north.
Well, that sounds like heaven to me right now. It's just just waking up, because it's in the morning there. Sure to warm up a little bit during the day. That's perfect temperature weather for me. But anyway, so just dreaming about that. But the other reason that got me thinking about Miami was that as of late, it seems that, and Miami in particular, a little bit maybe Florida in general, but Miami in particular, it seems like there's this tech wave that's been bubbling up the last few years. And
yes.
Certainly in regards to Bitcoin and kind of cryptocurrency, now I was actually looking at just some conferences that are coming up out there. So at the beginning of the year in 2022, North American Bitcoin Conference, Bitcoin 2022, International Conference on Blockchain for Industry, etc. There's quite a few things going on there, and I was just wondering if you can kind of tell people that are listening kind of what it's like on the ground there these days, how you're feeling about tech and entrepreneurship, and has that informed you or maybe guided you a little bit in why you started the new app that you're developing. So what do you think?
Sure. I actually started Lawzy pre-tech wave. I think pandemic especially got people thinking, well, where could I be where maybe the weather's a little bit nicer? Mm-hmm. We don't have state income tax. And so if you're starting a company and you want to keep more money in your pocket, where can I go? And Miami is really a very transient place. And that has really been changing. And a lot of the business here, I always say, you're either getting sick or you're getting sued. If you're driving down the highway, those are the billboards you see, right? It's for a lawyer, it's for a hospital, or maybe it's for travel. And now with tech really, becoming so much bigger during the pandemic, we're getting such a wave of different things, especially, the mayor of Miami, he's always on the news about promoting cryptocurrency.
Right.
And so now we're getting a huge wave there as well, where we're seeing, especially in Miami, different kinds of funds within the crypto space, which are just creating new jobs and new opportunities here.
Right. I really kind of see that and feel it just with some of the other folks that I know, and even some of the things like from New York, like some of the traditional industries from New York, like the financial industry, so like fintech. So that's kind of bubbling up because of course that's connected to cryptocurrency, but other reasons, I think, again, post-pandemic, some of the people that were in New York that don't want to be in that dense environment anymore or whatever, want to be able to go outside in the winter and that kind of stuff and feel like you're, healthier and not as susceptible. So it kind of makes sense, but I think that's an interesting twist of events. And it's got to be kind of fun for you doing what you're doing now because it's like, hey, there's all these other people that, we're all in this together, probably feel a little bit where you can really lean on their expertise and energy in terms of being an entrepreneur. So that's the thing that I want to dig into with you today. And that's one of the interesting things about you is that you started out as a lawyer and now you're developing and the co-founder, I don't know how you describe yourself, you can tell everybody, of Lawzy, the app. So tell everyone what Lawzy, the app is.
Sure. Lawzy is a mobile app. You can download it on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. And it's basically a very easy way to ask a lawyer a question. So oftentimes when you're experiencing a legal issue, the first place you're going to go if you want to hire a lawyer is a referral. It's going to be a friend, maybe a parent or a relative, or you're going to go online and you're going to start searching. And there's so much information online. There's so much legal jargon that people don't understand. And sometimes you don't really want to talk to anyone. That's the other flip side. You could call a lawyer, but then you have to go through the hassle of setting a consultation, right? And maybe you don't want to speak or pay for a half hour or an hour, or you might feel it's a free consultation. So is there a catch? So I thought, is there a very easy way you can ask a lawyer a question and receive a quick response? And that's really what Lawzy fixes, right? If you are purchasing a home and maybe there's a legal term in a contract that you don't fully understand, you can log on to Lawzy, you can select an area of law, you can type out your question, put in your credit card information, check out, and receive a response from a lawyer right on the app. And once you receive your response, you'll always have your answer within the app, but you also have the option of texting or emailing yourself or both your Q&A session. So this way, if you want another place where you can refer to that information more easily, you have that means to do it.
Oh, I like that. So your communications are all documented within the app and you get a copy of it? Is that what you're describing? Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know if I've seen another app out there that's like that kind of has that capability in terms of just the documentation part. Pretty interesting. Well, this whole thing is interesting because I think what you're describing there is certainly my experience and probably a common experience with everybody who's thinking about, first of all, most people probably are not connected to the law much like the average person and know many lawyers. But of course, exactly when you need a lawyer, it's like that's when you're stressed out, you don't know where to turn or you have some real questions on your mind. So it's like developing this easier access and maybe discovery tool for both parties, right? For potential clients or people that have questions, and for the lawyers themselves. That's pretty interesting. And I think I'm not so familiar with many of the alternatives that are out there, or I think historically law has been behind closed doors a little bit or something. I don't know how you would describe it, but it's been sort of like you got to go ask someone and call somebody and you got to go kind of seek it out. It hasn't been out in front, I guess. And maybe that's by design. I think that is by design. I know a couple lawyers and they kind of say like, we're not allowed to advertise, or maybe there's some legal reasons. Can you explain that to everybody kind of historically, how the law has kind of presented itself to society in a way?
Sure. I mean, I think to me, the magic word of how to describe law is that it's really been an industry of gatekeepers where we've kept things so close to us.
It's a good word.
Because as legal advisors, we have the ability to counsel you and we have a working knowledge of the law that an average person just doesn't have, which I have to say, I believe everyone should have some form of a legal education.
Right.
But because most people don't, you're very reliant on attorneys for advice, and lawyers want to keep it that way. State bar associations who regulate attorneys and attorney-client relationships, they want to maintain this level of control because that means they get more money. Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason, but there was a DOJ opinion that was issued that did say that this gatekeeping function of state bar associations, what does it do? It doesn't protect the public, right? It prevents access to justice, and ultimately it keeps money in the pockets of the state bar associations.
Right.
Now, with law, we've been very late to catch on to technology, arguably one of the latest industries. And instead of wanting to adopt it, what we've done is we've said we want to keep it out because, again, maintaining this gatekeeping function.
Right.
And that's going to take money away from lawyers. Well, now because of the pandemic, we've been forced to adopt technology.
Right.
So when I was practicing law during the pandemic, I had a 6-day trial that was completely through Zoom. So now you have court hearings that were forced to go online. And that really changed the perspective for lawyers and our court systems as a whole, where now we have to say, how can we utilize technology where we can actually help people make accessing our legal system more accessible where it's not right now?
Right.
And try to adopt technology. Having said that, there's still a long road ahead of us, but the pandemic has definitely helped.
Yeah, for sure. It's really started to crack that open. Like you said, it has been one of the industries that really hasn't embraced or felt compelled to embrace technology for whatever reason, like you said, historically, or just because it was always closed, or they thought they would lose money somehow, which, those are all, I guess, okay, decent motivations. I mean, everybody wants to make money and protect their industry, but yeah, now it's sort of, the world's changing and it's going to get disrupted sooner or later. It's better to be out in front of it, like you are. Like you have this vision, like, hey, I want to change this. Now's the time. People are maybe more open-minded to it, so that's pretty interesting. I was thinking about historically in terms of law and kind of trying to bring it to the common person or common man or common woman out there. I think it's been 20 years. I actually looked it up before we were going to talk today, since LegalZoom was founded. To me, that was like the first sort of foray into trying to make more sort of consumer-friendly legal things, right?
Sure.
And when we were talking before, I think you were mentioning to me, educating me about like, well, LegalZoom is for sort of documents, and it's only one sort of small sector that could have been done at that time because it was founded 20 years ago. And there was still sort of this clandestine gatekeeper, certainly mindset around, right? But that was just a little bit of the door was starting to crack open a little bit. I just thought that was interesting because I really haven't heard many other consumer-oriented legal things happening since then. It's been 20 years. So I think, believe it or not, you're really on the leading edge of what's happening right now.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because if you are a legal tech company and you are not a law firm, so even though I'm a lawyer, my company, Lawzy, is not a law firm. We connect you to lawyers who provide legal advice. But regardless of that, we still are regulated by each state bar associations, right? So therefore, depending on what that state bar association says we're allowed to do, right? We're very limited by that. So some states say that Lawzy can't exist there because they believe that, it's a form of providing legal advice and only law firms and attorneys can provide legal advice. And that's really prevented innovation. And LegalZoom, they really helped spearhead this whole change into legal tech through legal forms, because the argument is providing a legal form providing legal advice? Well, arguably some states will still say, yes, it is.
Okay.
Where most states have said, no, it's not. It's not legal advice. So all these little nuances have really prevented people from wanting to innovate within law, especially in our country, because the last thing you want is a bunch of lawyers to come after you, right? Suing you
Right.
for not following the rules that they created.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, perfectly stated. That's awesome. Okay. I love, because I was just trying to figure out why is it so crazy, but I didn't understand this state's sort of purview or the state's rights argument of like, hey, each state is allowed to, decide how they view that sort of, offering, I guess, right? And
Correct.
So to this day, so is Lawzy, does that operate in all 50 states, or how, if you wanted to use it, or how does that work? How would you even know what state I'm in or whatever? Are they watching your cell phone to see,
Right.
what your area code is or what?
I mean, at the end of the day, it'll just take someone reporting us for the Florida bar to say, okay, you can't operate here. We are approved by the Florida bar, so for us, it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're only in Florida because we're still in a beta testing phase.
I see. Okay.
And then the idea is to go state to state. But every state that we go into, we have to have ethics counsel who comes in and says, okay, the model that you have, this is allowed here. Or if it's not allowed here, these are the little functions that you need to change, which could be as small as changing, what our payment system is like, or adding a button. So we have a state-by-state approach. So for now, it's Florida, but the goal for us is definitely to expand, because I think there's such a need for affordable, reliant, good quality legal advice that, the average person can afford, which right now, I don't think that is fully available.
Right. I don't think there's any question about that. Like, we need better access. We need easier access, something that's contemporary. Like, hey, that's an app on my phone, because that's how everybody's working today. It's mobile. I don't have to, be physically somewhere and go down the street and walk into some law office, et cetera. It's like, hey, this is how I need to consume it now. This is where it needs to be. We just have to work out the details. So, wow, I really didn't realize the challenge that's ahead of you in terms of this state issue. So you really are spearheading this. This is cool. I love it. Okay, this is great.
We're definitely trying.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons we chose to do an app was yes, definitely the convenience factor. But we also felt that you have a sense of privacy in your cell phone that you might not have on a family computer. And pre-pandemic, at least I can speak, to this personally. I didn't use a computer unless it was at work or for work. I'm always on my cell phone.
Right.
So that's why we chose to do an app. And in addition to that, my background is family law. And what happens in family law is people often end up representing themselves in court because they feel that an attorney is too expensive, or maybe they just can't afford one. Mm-hmm. And so how cool would it be if you had this app on your phone where the advice that you received from a lawyer to help you navigate this process, because paying a flat fee for a question is much cheaper than paying the hourly rate for an attorney. And you could access this information, before going in front of a judge. So we tried to develop the app with both the consumer and the lawyer in mind to say, how can we simplify your life?
Right. Well, it makes total sense because, the people that are accessing it, especially if, cost is an issue, they probably only have one device, and it's probably a cell phone because it's has more utility than a laptop or a computer, right?
Right.
So,
and even if cost isn't an issue, for you, I can say for people who have invested in Lawzy, one of the reasons they chose to do it, and these are people who have sizable incomes, is they don't want to pay the 0.1 billable hour to ask their attorneys a legal question.
Right.
So if they could pay, $40 to get their question answered and not have to pay the 0.1 billable hour of their lawyer, who probably charges hundreds of dollars, right?
Sure.
They would rather do that.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. And if the lawyers that get involved with it helps widen out their market or their visibility or whatever, right? Their name recognition. So eventually, I'm sure it's a win-win for everybody, and that's the whole idea of why it would be pulled into the marketplace. So it's great. But okay, so I hear your passion in terms of like trying to get this access out there for everyone and really lower the cost, but really have it show up in the right way. So that makes me want to rewind a little bit and ask you about how did you think about developing this in the first place? I guess what's your real why? Because you were a lawyer, you were in family practice, and now it's my understanding that you're not doing that. You're doing the app and being the founder and being an entrepreneur full time now. So tell me about that journey.
For me, it's definitely in my blood to be an entrepreneur. My father is an entrepreneur who has had successful businesses. And my mom, she did insurance. So she was an insurance broker. And having that, she was an entrepreneur in her own right. So the idea of me having my own business always felt attainable because I had parents as role models who did it. So that was really helpful. But being a lawyer, especially in family law, you're exposed to how much money people spend and legal fees on a divorce or maybe a custody dispute. And at the end of the day, when you have a case that's really litigious, the people who win, it's not the parties, it's the lawyers.
Right.
And it was something that was really gut-wrenching for me, that really bothered me. Because even when you do great work for someone and, you win their case, it comes at such a heavy cost. And so I think this combination of wanting to be an entrepreneur and seeing a problem that I felt could be solvable, I felt this was kind of the time for me to do it. When I started Lawzy, I was 29. I didn't have kids except for my 2 dogs. I'm not married. I have a boyfriend who is kind of a child, but still not a child. And so in this moment, I'm never going to have less responsibility than I have right now.
Right.
And so why not try? Because the worst case scenario is that maybe it doesn't work, but I wouldn't consider that a failure whatsoever because I tried. And that's, 90% of people might not feel ready to take that leap.
Right. Well, there's never a perfect time to start. There's only the time to start.
Exactly.
Right. And that's how you have to think about it. And that's the mental process or journey that you have to go through with yourself. It's like, what am I doing? How could I leave this beautiful career that I've spent all this time studying for? Got these degrees and, showed up every day and did it, like for real. That's still a hard turn in your mind, I think, What was the kind of moment where you just thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm really going to do it and really dive in.
For me, so I worked at a very fast-paced law firm where we did all the celebrity, high net worth, divorces in Miami. So you see a lot of things and it's really exciting. But at the same time, it's a ton of work. It's a ton of billable hours.
Right.
And I was constantly stressed. I was sick more times in my life in that period of time than I was an attorney working there than I'd ever been in my life.
Wow. Okay. And
when you experience something like that, it really just puts things in perspective. And I remember being in, my corner office and saying to myself, is this really going to be my life? That I'm going to be doing this every single day?
Right.
And I thought there has to be a better way for me as well, because at some point I want to be a mother and I want to have more flexibility in my schedule. And I can't necessarily do that as a lawyer because as you move up, especially in family law, right, or any sort of litigation, you're expected to bill more and more hours.
Right.
And so the workload really doesn't go down, it goes up.
Right.
And it's not a matter of being lazy, but it's, wanting work-life balance. And I think for me, I just decided it's just not worth it. There has to be a better way to practice law in a way where you can have a life and be happy. And at the same time where I can help people and feel like I'm doing good and not taking what they have.
Right.
And what's also been really interesting is that when I decided to take this leap and do this, one of the partners at my law firm asked, well, what are you going to do next? And I always say I wouldn't tell him because I thought he would steal my idea.
Right.
But long story short, I did tell him and he ended up partnering with me. So my former boss is now my partner. So for me, it was a little bit easier to fully take the leap because I was able to then work part-time at the law firm while Lawzy was getting started. And I know that I always have a home there if I decide to go back. And so I will say that for me, I have that luxury that maybe other people wouldn't have. But had I not decided to quit my job, that would never have happened. So you just never know.
Yeah, you just never know. That's right. I mean, once you start, I guess, walking down that path, sort of the steps start to show up, right? The resources start to show up, but you have to kind of start down the path. Otherwise, they'll never show up, right?
Right. And then, there's all the negative self-talk. You start talking yourself out of why it's not going to work. And I think that's a big barrier for people because when you shut that out and you start thinking positively, that alone, it's just amazing what you end up doing.
Absolutely. And that's, again, it's like that. It's the journey you have to go through in your own mind. It's really what it boils down to all the time is like, everything that you've probably ever wanted is on that other side of that fear. It's on the other side. You have to just kind of go through it and just keep moving forward. But,
Right.
One thing you mentioned in terms of like, like kind of this big career and this kind of I came out of the same mold, and there's still a lot of people doing this, is this 20th century notion of you got to go to school and get these degrees and have this big high-flying career, et cetera, without much consideration for the lifestyle or the, your family part, or the other part is very sort of focused, here in the United States, I guess maybe in particular, on career, on the capitalistic part. But
Sure.
I like this lifestyle design part, and that's part of the reason why I do the podcast, of course, because it's sort of like all these other choices are available to us now, much more closer than years gone by. Like you said, your parents were entrepreneurs, and it takes a certain personality, but it was harder back then, I think. It was less known, less available. Like there was only a select group of people that were willing to take that big risk. It felt like a bigger risk. I think it's a little bit easier today with all the resources that we have
Yes.
available and the cost. And when you were talking, one thing came to mind to me in terms of you partnering with your boss, or your boss wanting to be part of it. Was this something that you found that you funded on your own, that you've funded on your own so far? Or did you go raise, venture capital money or friends and family money? How did you get off the ground with starting this?
I used savings. My partner and I put in the same amount of money to get started.
Mm-hmm.
And then we raised around through friends and family,
Mm-hmm.
which was extremely difficult during the pandemic.
Right.
And now we're in a place where we're ready to do a second round of funding. And instead of going the private equity route, what we're actually doing is crowdfunding.
Oh,
And
okay.
the reason that we're doing crowdfunding is because we have this goal of democratizing law. And how do you democratize law? Well, you need input from people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to have people, even if it's a little bit of interest in our company, right, to have a piece of it and to be part of the journey, so that whatever you need as a shareholder, you're part of our beta testing. You're giving us feedback, because
Mm-hmm.
without that, we're not going to know what you need. And it's just an additional way to get our name out, because
Right.
if you invest in Lawzy, you're a brand ambassador and you're going to want people to use it. And who do people go to when they need legal advice, right? They ask their friends and family for referrals. So if someone you trust says, hey, try this product, I'm an investor, they're more likely going to use the app versus if, it's something
Right.
new to the marketplace.
Yeah, I think this is a smart approach because for this type of application, the market has not been made yet. Like people don't wake up in the morning thinking like, hey, there's a legal app out there I know of that I'm going to go use, right? You're still kind of trying to get the word out. And so the crowdfunding part, like you said, it really works just a win-win-win for everybody. So it allows people to discover it. It gets the experience. You get the feedback to understand even how to develop, the proper offering for the marketplace, et cetera. So yeah, that's a great approach. Well, interesting. Well, Jillian, there's a little bit of time left on the podcast, and there's always a couple of questions that toward the end I like to ask people when they come on, and one is, especially for you because your background is in law and not in technology, how are you thinking about just technology in general and as you're moving farther in it, because now you're really have to understand how to develop software technology, how to develop an app, what a user interface is, and how all these things sit on your phone, and what platforms to use. Is it iPhone? Is it Android? All these kind of things. How are you feeling about technology, and how are you able to grasp it and dig into it, not being trained in it?
There's definitely a learning curve, 100%. And at times it's very difficult for me to take off my lawyer cap and put on a developer cap. For me, it's important, or it's been important, to have advisors or people who are part of Lawzy that don't have the experience that I have. So one thing that Paul and I did wrong in the very beginning is Paul and I, we think the same way because we're both lawyers, which is great because we validate each other's opinions. You know, we tend to agree on the same things.
Sure.
But the problem with that is there were so many things that we missed because we think the same way.
Right.
And so with navigating tech, I am not a CTO. I am not a developer. And so it's getting advisors and people who have that expertise to help guide us, because without it, you know, a developer is talking to you about something and it is a complete foreign language and they can break it down and break it down. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. So it's bringing people onto our team who can fill in the gaps that I don't have. That's really been helpful, but I like it. I am a nerd, so I love to learn. So learning about something I don't know about, it just makes me more well-rounded. I feel smarter. So it's been a challenge, but it's been a good one.
Right. Well, those are real words of wisdom spoken from real experience. So, yeah, I think people they surround themselves too often, I think, with just like-minded people versus, hey, I really need this diversity. I need this diversity of thought and experience and background, especially as you know, in law, you may or may not, you probably don't get that as much as working for any kind of manufacturing business, for example, where you see a lot of different disciplines. You know, in law, you sort of see a bunch of legal disciplines and, you know, just that one niche. So that's got to be interesting to, like you said, just intellectually stimulating to realize, oh, wow, I have to learn all this other new stuff. I got to start relating to different types of people. But that's some, you know, great, valuable experience to share. Well, cool. Well, I have one last question for you, and that is, through this fairly new experience of jumping into entrepreneurship, et cetera, what's a reinvention revelation you can share with people? Something that you've learned about yourself or about business, or about the new landscape that you're entering with technology that, you know, you didn't know before that could help someone who's also interested in reinventing themselves.
I think the number one takeaway for me would be you do not need to be perfect. In the beginning, we spent so much time and money on little tiny details on the app that we thought we had to have this functionality, we had to have this user experience. And, you know, a lot of it we had to end up wipe out completely and not use because it was too premature or those features weren't resonating with people. And what we should have done with our minimum viable product is have it a little uglier, have less bells and whistles, and go to the market. But I was so scared to put my name on something that wasn't pretty or wasn't perfect.
Right.
And, you know, through this experience, I learned you don't need a pretty product to get going. You just need something that works. And if you have something that solves a problem, it doesn't matter how pretty it is, people will still use it.
Right. Again, words of wisdom. And I know this through my own experience of being an engineer and developing products and stuff over time. Sometimes you just need to set a timeline and say, you get 18 months, and at the end of 18 months, you have to release something. I don't care what it is. You know, and then you'll kind of work back and you reverse engineer it and say, like, well, if that's the case, then I can only offer these three things at this level, at this quality level, et cetera, whatever it is. Yeah. Well, that's really great. Well, Jillian, it's been great having you on. If people are interested in finding out more about Lawzy, joining your crowdfunding, I don't know what platform you're going to use when that gets released, or being advocates for you within other states. I don't know if whatever states you're looking at other than Florida right now. Where would you send people? How would they get in touch with you?
Sure. You can go to our website, lawzyapp.com. You can also find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. My Instagram handle is Jillie Small, JILLIE_small, so like Biggie Smalls. Or you can also just find us equally on social media through Lawzy App is our handle for Twitter, and also on Instagram, Facebook. If you contact me on social media, I will definitely get back to you. Okay.
Sounds great. Well, I look forward to seeing your progress, and I know I have a few lawyer friends here. I'm going to just turn them onto Lawzy, the concept, and just try to get some feedback from them to see what they think about it. So it'll be fun for me just to have something to talk to my lawyer friends about.
Yes. And please give me the good, the bad, the ugly. It's really the bad and ugly advice where I learn. It's not really the great advice.
Right.
And that would be my second pearl of wisdom. It's really great when people tell you how wonderful your product is, but that doesn't make you better. It's when people tell you how much it sucks and where to improve. That's when you build a great product. So, any advice that your lawyer friends can give me that's a little constructive and negative, I'm all about.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, it just takes a great mindset and a great open mind, and that's the mind of an entrepreneur that you need to have. So, Jillian, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. See you next time, and remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey, revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it and will help others find the same value that you found.